On June 11th, 2003, a 9-year-old boy with a severe medical condition vanished from St. Louis, Missouri. His father claimed that this boy disappeared during a carjacking. Years later, prosecutors would say it was all a lie, and that the boy had been dead long before that 911 call was ever made. This is the case of Dawan and Christian Ferguson. Welcome back to Strawberry Ink True Crime. Today's episode covers the disappearance and presumed murder of Christian Ferguson and the long path that led to his father, Dawan Ferguson, being convicted not only of murder, but also of horrifying sexual offenses years later. The episode includes gruesome topics. Therefore, listener discretion is advised. On the morning of June 11th, 2003, 9-year-old Christian Ferguson was last seen in St. Louis, Missouri. Christian had a rare metabolic disorder and severe disabilities. He depended on daily medication and tube feeding just to stay alive. Without that care, doctors said he could only survive somewhere between about 24 and 72 hours. That morning, Christian's father, Dawan, contacted authorities from a payphone. He said that his 1999 Ford Expedition SUV had been stolen while he stepped away to make a call, and that Christian was inside the vehicle when it was taken. Police later found the SUV abandoned, keys still in the ignition. But Christian was gone and has never been seen again. As investigators dug in, the story started to crumble. Dawan had a working cell phone with him, raising questions about why he would need a payphone. The vehicle was located nearby, and nothing about the scene lined up with a classic stranger carjacking. More disturbing evidence emerged from Christian's medical records and home life. His critical medications had not been picked up for weeks before he was reported missing, and there were missed doctor's appointments and signs of severe neglect. Home health workers reported finding Christian in soiled bedding, sometimes tied to a bed, in conditions that showed he was not being properly cared for. A doctor later testified that Christian's weight and overall health had been significantly declining leading up to his disappearance. Family members and others described hearing distressing sounds from the house on the last night Christian was known to be alive. One woman even testified that the one confessed Christian was already dead before that 911 call, and that he had buried the boy under a construction site. However, it is not known if that actually happened, if this boy was actually buried at a construction site. He may have had been joking. Christian's body was never found, and because of his medical needs, as well as the time that passed, he is presumed dead. There was no funeral because, in order to have a funeral, you need at least some of the remains recovered, but for Christian, none of them have been recovered. Even before Christian vanished, there were already signs of criminal behavior. In 2004, Dawan and his wife, Monica, were tied to a federal criminal probe within the Eastern District of Missouri. Investigators said the couple tried to get a car loan illegally through their Capital One bank in St. Louis, using a false social security number back in 2002, a year before Christian disappeared. The car they wanted, a Ford Expedition. Dawan used his grandmother's social security number and even forged her signature in the process. It appeared that getting this vehicle and the money attached to it was more of a priority than properly caring for his medically fragile son. That case, the probe in particular, was presented to a federal grand jury at the St. Louis Federal Courthouse. In September 2004, the grand jury indicted Monica on 3 federal fraud felonies and Dawan on 4 of them. The indictment was unsealed and both were ordered to be taken into custody. Dawan hired attorney John Rogers. Monica hired attorney Douglas Roller. On October 1st, 2004, Dawan surrendered to court. He was briefly detained by U.S. Marshals, then brought before Magistrate Frederick Buckles. He was immediately released on a $20,000 bond and told to return to court on October 5th, but this time with his wife, since she had still been at large. On October 5th, both appeared before Magistrate Mary Ann Metler and pleaded not guilty. Monica was not handcuffed and was allowed to remain free on a $10,000 bond, which she immediately posted. On March 4th, 2005, both changed their pleas under deals negotiated with prosecutor Christian Stevens. Monica pleaded guilty to 1 charge and had her remaining ones dismissed. Dawan pleaded guilty to all 4 charges. Judge Catherine Perry immediately sentenced them. Dawan received 8 months in federal prison, and Monica was ordered to complete a diversion program. She did so within 6 months. Dawan waived his right to appeal and was ordered to surrender on May 3rd that year. Monica as well waived her right to appeal. On that date, he surrendered to the U.S. Marshals at the St. Louis Federal Court and was transported to the federal prison in Manchester, Kentucky. He was released on December 30th, 2005. Years later, in 2019, Dawan and Monica officially divorced at the St. Louis County Circuit Court. By 2019, Dawan was being investigated for sexually assaulting 2 girls, ages 11 and 16. At the same time, investigators re-examined Christian's disappearance and the other evidence of neglect. They looked at the pattern: missed medication, missed medical appointments, worsening health, and the testimony that Christian was treated inhumanely at home. On October 3rd, 2019, while working as a truck driver, Dawan returned to his home in Castle Point, Missouri. There, officers from the St. Louis County Police Department arrested him approximately 16 years after Christian went missing. He was booked into the St. Louis County Jail on a felony charge of first-degree murder. Soon after, Dawan was brought before Judge Madonna Gassedia in the St. Louis County Circuit Court. That judge set a $500,000 cash-only bond, essentially ensuring he would remain behind bars to await trial. The judge also ordered the case be presented to a grand jury. The grand jury at that circuit court confirmed the first-degree murder charge. Dawan's public defender, Jemia Steele, then entered a not guilty plea on his behalf, submitting the paperwork to the court. Later, Dawan parted ways with the public defender in the murder case and hired a private attorney, John Rogers of Clayton, Missouri. In that same month, prosecutor Wesley Bell charged him in a separate case, unrelated, with 5 sex offense counts tied to the sexual abuse investigation. Steele stayed on as his attorney for the sexual abuse case and submitted not guilty pleas on his behalf once again that December. In January, during a hearing before Judge Dina Waldemar, not guilty pleas would stand, and the judge ordered that his sexual abuse case be presented to a grand jury before proceeding with it in order for confirmation. Since Dawan was already being held on the murder charge, no new bond was set. The next month, another grand jury returned an indictment, confirming those sexual abuse charges. In June 2022, nearly 2 decades after Christian disappeared, Dawan finally went to trial for murder. Jury selection began on June 22nd, and opening statements followed on the 27th. A jury of 12 plus 2 alternates heard the evidence. On June 30th, Judge Brian May denied a defense motion to acquit and left the case in the jury's hands. On July 1st, Canada Day, the jury found Dawan guilty of murder. Just a month later, on August 1st, Dawan went to trial for the sexual abuse case. Another jury was quickly seated, 12 members and 4 alternates. Testimony moved fast. One of the victims, a younger girl, testified about the abuse. She said it took place over about a decade. Dawan took the stand in his own defense, claiming that this girl had found a used condom and used it to impregnate herself. A story the jury clearly did not accept. Judge Dean Waldemar, like Judge May in the murder case, refused to acquit him and left that up to the jury. On August 3rd, that jury found Dawan guilty on all charges related to the sexual abuse case. On September 16th, the following month, Judge Waldemar denied a motion for a new trial in that case. And on the 23rd, he sentenced Dawan to life in prison without parole on one rape charge, plus an additional 15 years on another rape count, 7 years each for the 2 sodomy counts, and 1 year for the molestation charge, all to be run consecutively. That meant life without parole plus 23 years. Then on the 27th, Judge May sentenced Dawan to life in prison without parole for murder. Dawan now carries 2 separate life sentences, as both are being served consecutively. Dawan has been working on appeals in both cases. For the sexual assault convictions, he already went up to the Missouri Court of Appeals in St. Louis. In a decision released on November 21st, 2023, right before Thanksgiving, the appellate court affirmed his convictions, denying him a new trial. For the murder conviction, he is preparing further challenges. The next step would typically be a hearing before Judge May on any post-trial motions, and if that fails, appeals to the higher state courts. Those matters are still pending. Right now, Dawan is being held at the Eastern Reception Center in Bonnie Terry, Missouri, undergoing evaluation and classification within the state prison system. If you know anything more about what happened to 9-year-old Christian Ferguson, where his remains might be, or details about those final days, consider sharing that information with authorities or a trusted organization. Christian lived a short, medically fragile life, and to this day there has been no recovery of his body and no proper burial. It is very sad. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more cases like this, make sure to follow the show, leave a rating or review, and share this episode with someone who follows true crime and wants to see justice fully carried out. not just on paper, but in truth.